Get her out of this room immediately. Admiral Jack Thompson's commanding voice boomed across the Pentagon Ring E conference room, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the small woman in the gray service uniform who had just entered with a tea service. We're discussing classified alpha-level intelligence about Operation Desert Shield 2. Does she even have the proper clearance to be in here? The 12 highest-ranking military officers in America turned their attention to Brianna Mitchell, who stood quietly by the mahogany conference table, her hands steady on the silver tea tray despite the sudden scrutiny. Her blue eyes remained downcast as she began setting cups with practiced precision. Colonel Martinez leaned back in his leather chair, shaking his head with obvious irritation. How did civilian staff get access during a security briefing? This is completely unacceptable. I apologize for the intrusion, sir, Brianna said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as she continued her task with methodical care. General Stevens adjusted his Air Force uniform and scoffed. Young lady, do you have any idea what kind of strategic discussions take place in this room? These aren't matters for... He paused, looking her up and down dismissively. Support staff. Captain Rodriguez, his marine dress blues adorned with combat ribbons, chuckled and nudged the officer beside him. I bet she's never even held a real weapon, let alone understood military tactics. Probably thinks a suppressor is something you use on a car. The room filled with condescending laughter as Brianna placed the final teacup on the table. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical in their efficiency, but something about her posture caught the attention of Sergeant Williams, who sat quietly in the corner taking notes. There was something familiar about the way she held herself. Shoulders square, spine straight, feet positioned at exactly shoulder width apart. Admiral Thompson drummed his fingers impatiently on the table, his seal trident pin glinting under the fluorescent lights. Miss, I need you to understand something. We're planning operations that could determine the fate of American servicemen and women overseas. This isn't a place for civilians who don't understand the gravity of what we do. Brianna nodded respectfully, but as she moved around the table, her eyes briefly scanned the tactical map spread across the mahogany surface. For just a moment, her gaze lingered on the satellite imagery of mountainous terrain, and her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir, Dr. Sarah Parker, the Pentagon civilian analyst, interjected gently, she's just doing her job. Perhaps we could continue once she's finished. Thompson's expression hardened. Dr. Parker, with all due respect, you're not military either. Some of us understand the importance of operational security. Major Brooks, an Army Ranger with multiple deployment ribbons, leaned forward. The Admiral's right. We can't have unauthorized personnel present when we're discussing troop movements and tactical positions. Brianna finished arranging the tea service and stepped back, her hands clasped behind her back in what appeared to be a respectful gesture. But Sergeant Williams noticed something odd. Her stance was perfectly aligned, weight evenly distributed, ready to move in any direction. It was the posture of someone who had been trained for combat readiness, not kitchen service. What's your security clearance level, miss? Thompson demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. I serve where I'm needed, sir, Brianna replied quietly, her response carefully measured and neutral. Colonel Martinez laughed harshly. That's not an answer. Either you have clearance or you don't. This isn't some civilian office where anyone can wander in during meetings. The tension in the room was palpable as the officers waited for Thompson to dismiss her, but something about Brianna's calm demeanor seemed to irritate him further. She wasn't cowering or apologizing profusely as he expected. Instead, she stood with quiet dignity, waiting for orders. You know what I think? Captain Rodriguez said with a smirk. I think our little tea server here watches too many military movies. Probably thinks she knows something about what we do. More laughter rippled through the room, but it was cut short when Thompson's aide knocked on the door. Sir, we have updated satellite intel from CENTCOM, the aide announced, entering with a classified folder. As Thompson reviewed the documents, his expression grew grave. Gentlemen, we have a problem. Our intelligence suggests there was a leak in the Afghanistan operations. Sensitive coordinates were compromised, resulting in the loss of an entire special operations unit. Brianna's hands, still clasped behind her back, tightened slightly. Her breathing remained steady, but something had shifted in her posture. The mention of Afghanistan had triggered a response that only a trained observer might notice. If this injustice makes your blood boil, please like and subscribe to support stories of justice. Hit the thanks button so we can continue bringing you twists you never see coming. Sergeant Williams watched Brianna carefully as the discussion continued. When Thompson mentioned the ghost unit betrayal, he saw her jaw clench for just a fraction of a second before returning to its neutral position. The leaked coordinates led to an ambush, General Stevens continued, spreading new photographs across the table. 8 highly trained operators lost their lives because someone sold them out. Thompson stood and began pacing, his frustration evident. We need to identify how this information was compromised. Too many good soldiers have died because of security breaches. As he spoke, Brianna moved to collect the empty cream pitcher, but her movement brought her closer to the tactical displays. Thompson noticed her proximity to the classified materials and exploded. What are you still doing here? I thought I made it clear that you need to leave. She's finishing the service, Admiral, Dr. Parker said defensively. There's no need to be harsh. Harsh? Thompson's voice rose. Dr. Parker, you clearly don't understand military protocol. We don't discuss classified operations in front of unauthorized personnel, no matter how harmless they might appear. Colonel Martinez stood as well, his patience clearly exhausted. Security should escort her out immediately. We can't continue with civilians present. But as they continued their discussion, none of them noticed that Brianna had positioned herself with a clear view of the entire room. Her seemingly humble task of clearing the tea service provided perfect cover for observing every face, every reaction, every tell that might indicate guilt or knowledge. Thompson deliberately knocked his coffee cup over, sending the dark liquid spreading across some non-classified papers. Clean this up, he ordered curtly, testing to see how she would respond to direct commands. Brianna immediately moved to address the spill, but her cleaning technique was unlike anything the officers had seen from typical custodial staff. She worked in a precise grid pattern, containing the liquid before expanding outward, using the most efficient method possible to prevent any secondary damage. It was the kind of systematic approach taught in military training for dealing with chemical spills or contaminated areas. Major Brooks, who had extensive field experience, found himself watching her technique with growing curiosity. Interesting approach to spill containment, he murmured to himself. As the discussion resumed, Admiral Thompson began outlining tactical positions for future operations. The problem with the Kandahar region, he said, pointing to the map, is the elevation changes make accurate fire support calculations extremely difficult. Sir, Major Brooks interjected, according to our ballistics reports, the standard calculation for that terrain would be approximately 2,000 meters effective range. From across the room, barely audible, came Brianna's voice. 2,400. The room fell silent. Thompson turned slowly to face her. Excuse me? Brianna looked up from cleaning the table, her cheeks flushing slightly. I apologize, sir. I shouldn't have spoken. No, Thompson said, his voice dangerously quiet. Please enlighten us. What did you say? I just thought the range calculation might be different at that elevation, Brianna said softly. Captain Rodriguez laughed loudly. Oh, this is rich. Our tea lady thinks she's a ballistics expert now. But Major Brooks frowned, pulling out his field calculator. After a few moments, his expression changed. Actually, sir, accounting for the altitude and atmospheric pressure in that region, she's right. The effective range would be closer to 2,400 meters. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. How did a civilian service worker know advanced ballistics calculations? Thompson's eyes narrowed as he studied Brianna more carefully. That's quite an educated guess for someone who serves tea. I watch a lot of documentaries, Brianna replied weakly, clearly trying to downplay her knowledge. General Stevens leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. What kind of documentaries? Military history, sir. I find it interesting. Colonel Martinez scoffed. Watching documentaries doesn't make you qualified to discuss tactical operations, young lady. The meeting continued, but there was now an undercurrent of curiosity about the quiet woman who had demonstrated unexpected knowledge. Thompson found himself testing her, dropping military terminology into his conversations to see if she would react. When he mentioned click measurements, Brianna didn't flinch at the military slang for kilometers. When Colonel Martinez discussed MUOS classifications, her expression remained carefully neutral, but she didn't ask for clarification like a true civilian would. Dr. Parker noticed the dynamic changing in the room. Perhaps we should focus on the task at hand, rather than interrogating the staff, she suggested diplomatically. Thompson's testing became more pointed. The problem with urban warfare, he said loudly, is dealing with what we call blue-on-blue situations. Several officers nodded knowingly, but Brianna's reaction was almost imperceptible, a slight tightening around her eyes that suggested she knew exactly what blue-on-blue meant. Friendly fire incidents. Did you catch that detail? Comment your theory about her real identity. Sergeant Williams had seen enough. Rising from his chair, he approached Thompson. Sir, I'd like to verify something. He walked over to the security station and checked his computer terminal. According to our records, Miss Mitchell has Level 5 clearance. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Level 5 clearance was higher than most of the officers present possessed. That's impossible, Colonel Martinez protested. She's civilian support staff. The computer doesn't lie, sir, Williams replied, showing his screen to Thompson. Clearance verified as of this morning. Signed off by the Inspector General's office. Thompson stared at the screen, then at Brianna, who continued organizing the tea service as if nothing unusual had happened. How does a service worker get Level 5 clearance? Maybe there's been a mistake, General Stevens suggested. But Williams shook his head. No mistake, sir. The authorization codes are current and valid. Thompson's frustration was mounting. Nothing about this woman made sense. Her knowledge of military tactics, her bearing, her security clearance, it all contradicted her apparent role. Miss Mitchell, Thompson said formally, I think we need some clarification about exactly who you are and why you're here. Before Brianna could respond, the conference room door opened, and Director Chen from the CIA entered. He nodded to the assembled officers, then his eyes found Brianna. To everyone's surprise, he offered her a respectful nod of acknowledgement. Director Chen, Thompson stood immediately. We weren't expecting CIA involvement in this operation. Admiral Thompson, Chen replied smoothly, I'm here to observe the briefing. Please continue. But Thompson noticed that Chen had positioned himself where he could see both the officers and Brianna. More puzzling was the fact that Brianna didn't seem surprised by Chen's presence. The discussion resumed, focusing on the security breach that had led to the Ghost Unit casualties. Thompson laid out the timeline of events, showing how classified coordinates had been leaked just hours before the mission. Someone with access to the highest levels of operational planning betrayed those men, Thompson said gravely. We need to identify the source of this leak before it happens again. As he spoke, Brianna continued her work, but her movements had become more deliberate. She was no longer just cleaning. She was listening to every word with focused intensity. Colonel Martinez pulled out a file folder. We've identified 3 potential sources for the leak. All had access to the operational details, and all had financial problems that might have motivated them to sell information. Financial problems? General Stevens asked. Gambling debts, sir. Significant ones. The color drained from Martinez's face as he realized what he had just revealed. His own gambling problem was a closely guarded secret, but the implications of his words hung heavy in the air. Thompson studied each face in the room, looking for tells, for signs of guilt or nervousness. But his attention kept returning to Brianna, who had gone very still during the discussion of betrayal and financial motivations. The meeting was interrupted by an emergency alert tone from everyone's secure communications devices. Officers reached for their phones, checking for updates, but Brianna also reached into her pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a similar device. Why does she have a secure communication device? Captain Rodriguez demanded. Thompson's suspicion finally boiled over. He strode across the room and grabbed Brianna's arm, his patience completely exhausted. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. I want answers, and I want them immediately. The force of his grip caused Brianna's sleeve to ride up, revealing the edge of what appeared to be an elaborate tattoo on her forearm. Thompson caught a glimpse of black ink that looked like the outline of a weapon, but before he could examine it more closely, Brianna pulled her arm free. Please don't touch me, sir, she said quietly, but there was something new in her voice, a note of authority that hadn't been there before. Thompson stared at the covered tattoo, his mind racing. He had seen thousands of military tattoos over his career, and something about the brief glimpse he had gotten seemed significant. But before he could pursue it, the meeting was interrupted again. Major Brooks received an urgent message on his device. Sir, we have updated intelligence from Afghanistan. The investigation into the Ghost Unit ambush has identified new evidence. The room's attention shifted to Brooks as he read from his secure tablet. According to this report, the Ghost Unit wasn't just ambushed. They were systematically betrayed by someone with intimate knowledge of their operational procedures. Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. Ghost unit operations were classified at the highest levels. Very few people would have had access to their specific tactics and procedures. "What kind of evidence?" General Stevens asked. "Communication intercepts, sir. The enemy knew exactly when and where Ghost Unit would be, what equipment they were carrying, even their individual specializations." Brianna had gone completely motionless during this exchange. Her face remained neutral, but her breathing had become more controlled, more deliberate. "There's more, sir," Brooks continued. "The report indicates that Ghost Unit had an embedded investigator, someone working undercover to identify the source of previous intelligence leaks." Thompson's mind was working frantically now. An embedded investigator would explain the high-level clearance, the tactical knowledge, the CIA connection. But it would also mean... He looked at Brianna with new eyes, seeing past the humble service uniform to the woman beneath. Her posture, her awareness, her reactions, everything suddenly made sense in a completely different context. "Brooks," Thompson said slowly, "does that report identify the embedded investigator?" Brooks scrolled through his device. "Partially, sir. It shows the codename Silent Angel and indicates the operative is still active, still investigating." The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was processing the implications, but Thompson's attention was focused entirely on Brianna. Her reaction to the codename had been barely perceptible, but he had caught it. A slight straightening of her shoulders, a brief closing of her eyes. "Interesting tattoo you have there, miss," Thompson said quietly, his voice carrying a new undertone of respect mixed with uncertainty. Brianna met his eyes for the first time since entering the room. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "Sir, you asked me about my rank earlier." "Yes, I did. I told you I serve where I'm needed." Thompson nodded slowly. "And where exactly are you needed, Miss Mitchell?" The room held its collective breath as Brianna seemed to make a decision. Her entire demeanor shifted subtly, the deferential service worker facade falling away to reveal something much more formidable underneath. "Right here, Admiral," she said quietly, "investigating the murder of my team." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Thompson felt his world shifting as the full implications of what she had said began to register. The quiet woman he had been dismissing and humiliating for the past 30 minutes was not what she appeared to be. Colonel Martinez had gone pale, his hands shaking as he reached for his water glass. Captain Rodriguez was staring at Brianna with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. General Stevens looked like he had seen a ghost. "Your team?" Thompson asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. "Ghost Unit 7, sir. 8 operators. 7 killed in action due to compromised intelligence. 1 survivor." The confession hit the room like a physical blow. Several officers pushed back from the table, suddenly understanding that everything they thought they knew about the past hour had been wrong. Thompson's tactical mind was racing through the implications. If she was Ghost Unit, if she had survived the ambush, if she was here investigating, then everyone in this room was a potential suspect in the death of her teammates. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you're the surviving member of Ghost Unit 7? "Yes, sir." "And you're here investigating who betrayed your mission?" "Yes, sir." Thompson looked around the room at his fellow officers, seeing them now as Brianna must see them, as potential traitors who had caused the death of American soldiers. This laptop can withstand the harshest combat conditions, similar to the equipment that special operations units trust for their most critical missions. The revelation recontextualized every moment of the past hour. Her knowledge of ballistics, her tactical awareness, her security clearance, her reaction to mentions of Afghanistan and Ghost Unit, it all made perfect sense now. "How?" Thompson asked. "How did you survive when your entire unit was killed?" Brianna's expression didn't change, but there was something haunting in her eyes. "I was providing overwatch from an elevated position 2 clicks out. When the ambush began, I maintained position and provided covering fire while requesting immediate extraction for survivors." "Were there any?" "No, sir. By the time the QRF arrived, I was the only one left." The room was silent, except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Every officer present was grappling with the reality that they had been interrogating a war hero who had watched her entire team die. Thompson sat heavily in his chair, the weight of his behavior over the past hour crushing down on him. He had dismissed, belittled, and humiliated a soldier who had sacrificed everything in service to her country. "Miss Mitchell," he began, but she interrupted him. "Master Sergeant Mitchell, sir." The correction was delivered without malice, but it carried the full weight of her service and sacrifice. Thompson realized that not only had he been wrong about her identity, but she actually outranked several of the people in the room. "Master Sergeant Mitchell," he corrected himself, "I owe you an apology." "Sir, the apology I need isn't for me. It's for Sergeants Chen, Williams, Martinez, Rodriguez, Thompson, Jackson, and Lee. They're the ones who died because someone in this chain of command sold them out." The names hit like hammer blows. These weren't just code names or numbers. They were real people with families, friends, lives that had been cut short by betrayal. Captain Rodriguez, who had been making jokes about her weapon handling earlier, was now staring at his hands. The woman he had mocked was a combat veteran who had probably seen more action than he ever would. General Stevens cleared his throat. "Master Sergeant, if you're investigating this leak, then you must have some idea who might be responsible." Briona's gaze swept the room, stopping briefly on each face before moving on. "Sir, I've been observing this command structure for 6 months. During that time, I've documented 17 separate instances of classified information being accessed inappropriately." Thompson felt sick. 17 instances? "Yes, sir, including 3 occasions where operational details were discussed in unsecured locations, 5 instances of classified documents being left unattended, and 9 cases of personnel accessing information outside their operational need to know." The systematic nature of her investigation was becoming clear. She hadn't been serving tea. She had been gathering evidence. Colonel Martinez was sweating now, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "What kind of evidence?" "Audio recordings, sir. Photographic documentation. Digital forensics from compromised systems." Dr. Parker, who had been the only one to defend Brianna earlier, spoke up. "How long have you been working undercover?" "Since 3 weeks after the ambush, ma'am. The Inspector General's office assigned me to investigate potential security breaches in high-level command structures." Thompson was beginning to understand the scope of what had been happening right under his nose. "And your cover as service staff?" "Provided perfect access to classified meetings, sir. People tend not to notice support staff, and they often discuss sensitive matters as if invisible people can't hear them." The truth of that statement hit everyone in the room. How many times had they discussed classified information in front of custodial staff, servers, or other civilian workers? Sergeant Williams, who had been quietly observing throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "Master Sergeant, I want you to know that some of us suspected something wasn't standard about you." Brianna nodded, acknowledging his awareness. "You have good instincts, Sergeant Williams. Your operational security is exemplary." The praise from a proven special operations veteran clearly meant something to Williams, but it also highlighted how far the other officers had fallen short of proper security protocols. Thompson was struggling with the magnitude of his errors. Not only had he been incredibly disrespectful to a decorated veteran, but he had potentially compromised his own security by discussing classified matters in front of someone he assumed was cleared to hear them. "Master Sergeant," he said formally, "what happens now?" Brianna reached into her service uniform and withdrew a thin device that has looked like a standard cleaning supply inventory scanner. She pressed several buttons, and the device emitted a soft beep. "Sir, for the past hour, this room has been under complete surveillance. Every conversation has been recorded, every action documented, every security violation noted." The blood drained from Thompson's face. "You've been recording us?" "Yes, sir. With full authorization from the Inspector General and the Pentagon's Internal Affairs Division." Captain Rodriguez looked like he might be sick. "Everything?" "Every word, sir." Thompson thought back over the conversation, remembering every dismissive comment, every security breach, every moment of unprofessional conduct. It was all on record. "What you need to understand," Brianna continued, "is that this investigation isn't just about the Ghost Unit ambush anymore. It's about systematic failures in operational security that have put American lives at risk." General Stevens leaned forward. "Are you saying there have been other incidents?" "Sir, in the 6 months I've been observing this command structure, classified information has been compromised on 14 separate occasions. 3 of those compromises resulted in mission failures. 1 resulted in casualties. The weight of those statistics settled over the room like a shroud. They weren't just dealing with a single betrayal. They were looking at a pattern of security failures that had gotten people killed. Colonel Martinez finally broke his silence. "Master Sergeant, what evidence do you have against specific individuals?" Brianna studied his face carefully before answering. "Sir, I have documented evidence of unauthorized access to classified databases, unexplained financial transactions, and communication with individuals who have since been identified as foreign intelligence assets. Martinez's face went gray. He knew exactly what she was talking about, and he knew that his carefully hidden gambling debts and the desperate measures he had taken to pay them off were no longer secret. Additionally, Brianna continued, I have evidence of classified information being discussed in unsecured locations, operational details being shared with individuals outside the need-to-know circle, and security protocols being consistently violated. She was describing systematic failures that went beyond individual betrayal to institutional breakdown. Thompson realized that his own behavior during this meeting, dismissing her without proper clearance verification, discussing classified matters in front of unvetted personnel, failing to maintain proper operational security, was exactly the kind of systematic failure she was investigating. Master Sergeant, he said quietly, I need to know. How bad is it? Brianna met his eyes directly. Sir, the security breaches I've documented over the past 6 months have potentially compromised 17 ongoing operations, exposed the identities of 4 deep-cover assets, and resulted in the deaths of 11 American service members. The numbers were staggering. What had started as an investigation into a single ambush had uncovered a massive failure of operational security at the highest levels of command. Dr. Parker spoke up. What's the next step in your investigation? Ma'am, tomorrow morning, I'll be presenting my findings to a joint committee of the Inspector General, the Pentagon's Internal Affairs Division, and representatives from the intelligence community. Based on those findings, formal charges will be filed. Thompson felt the walls closing in. What kind of charges? Sir, that will depend on the level of involvement of each individual. The charges could range from negligent handling of classified materials to treason. The word treason hung in the air like a death sentence. Several officers shifted uncomfortably, each wondering where they stood in Brianna's investigation. Captain Rodriguez, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Master Sergeant, I want to apologize for my earlier comments. They were completely inappropriate and disrespectful. Brianna acknowledged his apology with a nod, but her expression remained professional. Sir, the comments are the least of my concerns. What matters is identifying and stopping the security breaches that are getting our people killed. Thompson knew she was right, but he also knew that his conduct during this meeting would be part of her report. The way he had treated a decorated veteran, the casual way he had discussed classified information, the complete failure to follow proper security protocols. It would all be documented. Master Sergeant, he said, I need to ask you directly. Am I under suspicion for the security breaches? Brianna considered the question carefully. Sir, every person with access to the compromised information is under investigation. That includes everyone in this room. The statement hit like a physical blow. Everyone present was a suspect in the betrayal and deaths of American soldiers. Colonel Martinez stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to step out for a moment. Sir, Brianna said firmly, I'm afraid that won't be possible. This room is now under security lockdown, pending the completion of my investigation. Martinez froze. What does that mean? It means that no one leaves until the Inspector General's team arrives to take formal statements and secure evidence. Thompson looked around the room with new eyes. They weren't just participants in a meeting anymore. They were all potential suspects in a criminal investigation. The transformation in the room's dynamic was complete. The woman they had dismissed and humiliated was now revealed as the person investigating them for potentially capital crimes. Thompson's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and paled further. Master Sergeant, I just received notification that Inspector General investigators are en route to this location. Yes, sir. They should arrive within the next 10 minutes. The finality of it was sinking in. There would be no opportunity to destroy evidence. No chance to coordinate stories, no way to minimize their exposure. Everything they had said and done was already documented. General Stevens looked around the room at his fellow officers. Gentlemen, I think we need to prepare ourselves for the possibility that our careers are over. Brianna's expression softened slightly. Sir, the investigation will follow the evidence. Those who have maintained proper security protocols and acted with integrity have nothing to fear. But Thompson knew that his own conduct during the meeting had been far from exemplary. The casual dismissal of security protocols, the unprofessional treatment of a veteran, the complete failure to verify clearances before discussing classified matters. It painted a picture of systematic failure that went beyond any individual act of betrayal. The door to the conference room opened, and Director Chen stepped back inside, this time accompanied by several individuals in suits who were clearly not military personnel. "Gentlemen, ladies," Chen announced, "I'd like you to meet the team from the Inspector General's office, who will be conducting formal interviews regarding the security investigation." Thompson looked at Brianna one more time, seeing her now as she truly was, not a humble service worker, but a decorated special operations veteran who had infiltrated their command structure and documented their failures with methodical precision. As the investigators began setting up their equipment and preparing for formal interviews, Thompson realized that the next few hours would determine not just his career, but potentially his freedom. The quiet woman who had been serving tea had just brought down their entire command structure, and there was nothing any of them could do to stop what was coming next. The lead investigator, a stern woman in her 50s wearing a dark suit, stepped forward and addressed the room. "I'm Agent Sarah Morrison from the Inspector General's office. Before we begin formal proceedings, I need to verify something with Master Sergeant Mitchell." Thompson watched as Brianna straightened to full military bearing, her transformation from humble service worker now complete in everyone's eyes. "Master Sergeant," Agent Morrison continued, "your preliminary report mentioned physical evidence that supports your investigation findings. Can you elaborate?" Brianna nodded professionally. "Yes, ma'am. During today's surveillance operation, I documented 17 separate security violations and obtained audio evidence of classified disclosures." Colonel Martinez shifted nervously in his seat, his face growing more ashen by the minute. "What kind of disclosures?" Agent Morrison fixed him with a sharp look. "Colonel Martinez, you will have your opportunity to respond during your formal interview." The second investigator, a younger man with military bearing, began setting up recording equipment, while a third agent positioned herself near the door, clearly ensuring no one could leave. Thompson found himself studying Brianna with new respect and growing dread. The precision of her operation, the systematic way she had gathered evidence, the patience required to maintain her cover for 6 months, it spoke to a level of professionalism and dedication that he was only beginning to understand. "Master Sergeant Mitchell," Agent Morrison said, "please provide a summary of today's specific observations for the record." Brianna pulled out what Thompson now realized was a sophisticated recording device disguised as a cleaning supply scanner. "Ma'am, at 0800 hours, I entered conference room 7 with standard tea service as cover for surveillance activities. During the 47-minute observation period, I documented multiple instances of classified information being discussed in the presence of unverified personnel." Thompson felt sick. She was describing his own behavior, his failure to verify her clearance before allowing her to remain during classified discussions. "Additionally," Brianna continued, "I observed Colonel Martinez display visible signs of stress when discussing the financial motivations behind intelligence leaks. Captain Rodriguez demonstrate detailed knowledge of classified operational failures he shouldn't have access to, and General Stevens reveal information about ongoing investigations that was above his clearance level." Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Thompson watched his fellow officers process the realities that their own words and actions had been systematically documented and analyzed. Agent Morrison made notes on her tablet. "Were there any attempts to obstruct your investigation or compromise your cover?" "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Thompson made several attempts to remove me from the room without proper clearance verification and used inappropriate physical contact when I declined to reveal sensitive information." Thompson's blood ran cold. Physical contact? Then he remembered grabbing her arm when he had seen the edge of her tattoo. At the time, he had been acting on authority and frustration, but now he realized how that action would appear in an official report. Captain Rodriguez finally spoke up, his voice shaky. "Master Sergeant, when you mention classified operational failures I shouldn't have access to, what specifically are you referring to?" Brianna consulted her device. "Sir, during the discussion of the Kandahar operations, you referenced specific casualty numbers and tactical failures that were classified under Operation Silent Thunder. Those details were only available to personnel directly involved in the post-action analysis." Rodriguez paled. "How do you know what my access levels should be?" "Sir, Part of my investigation involved reviewing the access logs for all personnel involved in operations related to the Ghost Unit ambush. Your clearance level doesn't authorize access to Silent Thunder materials. The implication was clear. Rodriguez had obtained classified information through unauthorized means. Thompson was beginning to understand the scope of what Brianna had uncovered. This wasn't just about the Ghost Unit betrayal. It was about a systematic breakdown of operational security that had been going on for months. Agent Morrison turned to General Stevens. General, Master Sergeant Mitchell mentioned that you revealed information about ongoing investigations. Can you explain what she's referring to? Stevens looked confused. I don't recall discussing ongoing investigations. Brianna activated her recording device, and Stevens' own voice filled the room. The investigation into the Ghost Unit ambush has identified new evidence. Communication intercepts show the enemy knew exactly when and where Ghost Unit would be. Stevens' face went white as he heard his own words played back. That information was classified at the highest levels. How did I... Sir, Brianna said quietly, that information was provided to you in a classified briefing yesterday morning. You discussed it in an unsecured environment in front of personnel who hadn't been cleared to receive it. The systematic nature of the security failures was becoming apparent. Each officer had compromised classified information, either through carelessness or deliberate action. Thompson knew his own moment of reckoning was coming. Master Sergeant, what violations did you document regarding my conduct? Brianna met his eyes directly. Sir, you discussed alpha-level classified operational details in the presence of unverified personnel, failed to follow proper security protocols for clearance verification, and attempted to physically intimidate a federal investigator conducting authorized surveillance. Thompson felt the walls closing in. Each charge was accurate, and each one could end his career or worse. Agent Morrison continued taking notes. Master Sergeant, in your professional opinion, do these security violations represent isolated incidents or part of a larger pattern? Ma'am, based on 6 months of investigation, these represent systematic failures in operational security protocols. The pattern suggests either gross negligence or deliberate compromise of classified information. Colonel Martinez suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly. I can't do this anymore. I need to tell you something. Agent Morrison looked up from her tablet. Colonel, I strongly advise you to wait for your formal interview before making any statements. No, Martinez said, his voice breaking. I can't let this continue. Master Sergeant Mitchell is right. The Ghost Unit coordinates were leaked, and I know how it happened. The room fell into stunned silence. Thompson watched as one of his fellow officers prepared to confess to treason. Colonel Martinez, Agent Morrison said formally, are you requesting to make a voluntary statement at this time? Martinez nodded, tears forming in his eyes. Yes, I leaked the Ghost Unit coordinates. The confession hit the room like a bomb. Several officers gasped, and Captain Rodriguez actually pushed his chair back from the table. Why? Thompson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Martinez collapsed back into his chair, his hands shaking. Gambling debts. I owed $250,000 to people who don't accept late payments. They offered to clear my debts in exchange for information. Brianna watched Martinez with no visible emotion, but Thompson could see the tension in her shoulders. This was the moment she had been working toward for 6 months, the confession that would give justice to her fallen teammates. How did you access the coordinates? Agent Morrison asked. I used my administrative access to the operations database. The Ghost Unit mission was classified, but my position gave me oversight authority for resource allocation. Thompson felt sick. Martinez had used his legitimate access to betray American soldiers. Do you understand what you've done? 8 soldiers died because of your gambling debts. Martinez broke down completely. I know. Holy cow. I know. I've thought about those men every day for the past 8 months. I tried to tell myself it was just coordinates, just numbers, but I knew what I was doing. Brianna spoke for the first time since Martinez's confession began. Sergeant Chen was 24 years old. He had just gotten engaged. Sergeant Williams was planning to retire in 6 months to spend more time with his grandchildren. Sergeant Martinez, no relation to you, Colonel, was saving money to bring his family to America from El Salvador. She continued, naming each of the fallen soldiers and sharing personal details that made them real people rather than statistics. Thompson watched Martinez crumble as the full weight of his betrayal was laid out in human terms. Sergeant Thompson was my spotter, and had been with the unit for 3 years. Sergeant Jackson was our medic and had saved countless lives during previous deployments. Sergeant Lee was our communications specialist and spoke 4 languages fluently. They were good soldiers, good men, and they died because you sold them out for money. Martinez was openly weeping now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I would give anything to take it back. Agent Morrison was taking detailed notes, but Thompson could see that even the federal investigator was affected by Brianna's recitation of the fallen soldiers' names and stories. Colonel Martinez, Agent Morrison said formally, you are now considered to be making a voluntary confession to federal crimes. Do you wish to continue without legal representation? Yes, Martinez said firmly. I want to tell you everything. Thompson watched in horrified fascination as Martinez detailed his financial problems, his initial contact with foreign agents, the specific information he had provided, and the payment methods used. It was a complete confession to treason, delivered in a room full of witnesses. But Brianna wasn't finished. Colonel Martinez, you mentioned that they offered to clear your debts. Who specifically approached you? Martinez looked up, confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, Colonel, that someone had to know about your gambling problems in order to target you for recruitment. Someone had to identify you as a potential asset and arrange the initial contact. Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. Brianna was suggesting that Martinez hadn't been randomly targeted. He had been deliberately recruited by someone with inside knowledge. I never thought about that, Martinez admitted. A man approached me at a bar near the base. He seemed to know all about my situation. What bar, Colonel? Murphy's Tavern, about 2 miles from the main gate. Agent Morrison looked up from her notes. Master Sergeant, are you suggesting there's a larger conspiracy here? Ma'am, in my investigation, I've identified patterns that suggest systematic targeting of personnel with financial or personal vulnerabilities. Colonel Martinez may not be the only one who was recruited. The room fell silent as everyone processed this new information. The betrayal might not have been an isolated incident, but part of a larger operation to compromise military personnel. Thompson found himself thinking about his own vulnerabilities, his own financial pressures, his own moments of weakness. Could he have been targeted too? Captain Rodriguez spoke up suddenly. Master Sergeant, when you mentioned that I had access to information I shouldn't have, how did I get that information? Brianna turned to face him directly. Sir, that's an excellent question. According to the access logs, you never actually accessed the Silent Thunder files yourself. Then how did I know those details? Someone told you, sir. Someone with authorized access shared classified information with you, either knowingly or unknowingly. Rodriguez looked around the room. Who? Who could have told me? Thompson's mind was racing through conversations, trying to remember who had discussed what with whom. The systematic nature of the security compromise was becoming clearer, but so was the complexity of the problem. Agent Morrison stood up. I think we need to conduct individual interviews to sort out the specifics of who knew what and when. Master Sergeant Mitchell, is there anything else you need to present before we begin formal questioning? Brianna hesitated, then reached into her service uniform again. Ma'am, there is one more piece of evidence that needs to be documented. She pulled out a small digital camera and began scrolling through what appeared to be photographs. During my investigation, I documented not just audio recordings, but also visual evidence of security violations. Thompson's stomach dropped. Visual evidence? What had she photographed? These images show classified documents being left unattended, personnel accessing unauthorized systems, and individuals photographing classified materials with personal devices. She handed the camera to Agent Morrison, who began scrolling through the images. The agent's expression grew increasingly serious as she viewed the evidence. General Stevens, Agent Morrison said, can you explain this photograph showing you using a personal cell phone to photograph a classified document? Stevens looked at the camera display and went pale. I was just taking a picture to reference later during my report writing. Sir, Brianna said, photographing classified documents with personal devices is a felony regardless of the intended use. Thompson realized that every officer in the room was likely documented committing some form of security violation. Brianna's investigation had been comprehensive and devastating. Next week features a nurse who gets dismissed at a military hospital. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Agent Morrison continued reviewing the photographic evidence, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. Each image represented another nail in the coffin of their careers. "Admiral Thompson," Agent Morrison said, showing him the camera, "this image shows you reviewing classified documents while in an unsecured location. Can you explain the circumstances?" Thompson looked at the photograph, which showed him reading operational reports in what appeared to be the base cafeteria. "I was multitasking during lunch. I didn't think anyone would be able to see the documents from that angle." "Sir," Brianna said quietly, "I was able to photograph those documents from across the room using standard telephoto capabilities. If I could do it, so could foreign intelligence operatives." The casual nature of their security violations was being exposed in stark detail. What had seemed like minor shortcuts and conveniences were revealed as serious compromises of national security. Thompson looked around the room at his fellow officers, seeing the same realization in their faces. Their careers were over, and potentially their freedom as well. Agent Morrison closed the camera and returned it to Brianna. "Master Sergeant, based on your investigation, what is your recommendation regarding these personnel?" "Ma'am, I recommend immediate suspension of security clearances pending full investigation, formal charges for violations of federal security statutes, and comprehensive review of all operations these individuals have had access to over the past 18 months. The recommendation was professional and thorough, but it essentially amounted to the complete destruction of everyone present's military career. Colonel Martinez, who had been quiet since his confession, spoke up again. "Master Sergeant, I need to ask you something. When you were assigned to investigate this unit, did you know I was the one who had leaked the coordinates?" Brianna considered the question carefully. "Sir, I had suspicions based on access logs and timeline analysis, but I didn't have proof until you provided it voluntarily." "So you've been watching me specifically?" "Sir, I've been watching everyone with access to the compromised information. You, Admiral Thompson, General Stevens, Captain Rodriguez, and 12 other personnel across different departments." Thompson felt a chill. 12 others? The scope of the investigation was much larger than anyone had realized. Agent Morrison looked up from her notes. "Master Sergeant, are you saying there are additional subjects under investigation beyond the personnel in this room?" "Yes, ma'am. The pattern of security compromises extends across multiple departments and command structures. Today's operation was focused on this specific group because of their direct involvement in operations related to Ghost Unit." Thompson was beginning to understand that they had been targeted specifically because of their connection to the mission that had gotten Brianna's teammates killed. This wasn't a random security audit. It was a focused investigation into the people responsible for American deaths. "Admiral Thompson," Agent Morrison said, "I need to address the allegation regarding inappropriate physical contact with Master Sergeant Mitchell. Can you describe what happened?" Thompson felt his face burning with shame as he recalled grabbing Brianna's arm. "I was frustrated by her presence in the classified briefing and wanted to verify her identity. I grabbed her arm to examine what appeared to be a tattoo. Did Master Sergeant Mitchell consent to this contact?" "No. She asked me not to touch her, but I ignored her request." Agent Morrison made additional notes. "Master Sergeant, how did you respond to this inappropriate contact?" "Ma'am, I maintained my cover and continued the surveillance operation. However, the Admiral's actions did compromise operational security by forcing partial exposure of identifying marks." Thompson realized she was referring to the tattoo he had glimpsed. "What kind of identifying marks?" Brianna looked at Agent Morrison, who nodded her approval. "Sir, personnel in special operations units often have distinctive markings that identify their service and specialization." She rolled up her left sleeve, revealing an elaborate tattoo that covered her entire forearm. Thompson's breath caught in his throat as he saw the detailed image of a sniper rifle surrounded by military insignia, mission markers, and what appeared to be a memorial section with names and dates. "Holy cow," Captain Rodriguez whispered. "That's a Barrett M82A1. "Yes, sir," Brianna confirmed. "My primary weapon system during my time with Ghost Unit." Thompson studied the tattoo more carefully, seeing details that spoke to years of military service and countless missions. Around the rifle were markings that indicated confirmed kills, operational deployments, and commendations. At the bottom, in elegant script, were 8 names with dates, her fallen teammates. General Stevens leaned forward to get a better look. "Master Sergeant, those markings, are those mission indicators?" "Yes, sir. 17 confirmed long-range eliminations, 6 combat deployments, 3 commendations for valor. The room fell silent as everyone processed what they were seeing. This wasn't just any soldier. This was an elite warrior with a combat record that exceeded most of their combined experience. Thompson felt the full weight of his earlier behavior crashing down on him. He had dismissed, belittled, and physically handled one of the most experienced combat soldiers in the American military. "Master Sergeant," he said quietly, "I need to apologize not just for today, but for completely failing to recognize your service and sacrifice." Brianna met his eyes directly. "Sir, the apology I need isn't for my treatment. It's for the failure of leadership that allowed my teammates to die." The distinction was important and painful. She wasn't concerned about personal slights. She was focused on justice for the soldiers who had been betrayed. Agent Morrison continued her documentation process. "Master Sergeant, for the record, please state your military occupation specialty and current assignment." "Ma'am, I'm a Master Sergeant, Military Occupation Specialty 11 Bravo 20 Special Operations Sniper, currently assigned to the Inspector General's office as an undercover investigator specializing in counterintelligence operations." Thompson realized that not only had he been completely wrong about her identity, but her actual rank and specialization meant she outranked several people in the room and had more combat experience than all of them combined. This online legal course helps understand military regulations and veteran rights, something every service member should know. Captain Rodriguez, who had made jokes about her weapon handling earlier, looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "Master Sergeant, I want to formally apologize for my earlier comments. They were completely inappropriate and disrespectful to your service. Sir, your comments revealed important information about your knowledge of classified operations. From an investigative standpoint, they were actually quite helpful. The clinical way she analyzed even the insults directed at her demonstrated the level of professionalism and focus that had made her investigation so effective." General Stevens spoke up. "Master Sergeant, I need to understand something. When you said there were patterns suggesting systematic targeting of vulnerable personnel, what did you mean?" Brianna consulted her notes. "Sir, my investigation identified 7 military personnel across 3 different commands who were approached by the same foreign intelligence network. All 7 had significant financial problems, personal vulnerabilities, or family situations that could be exploited." "Are you saying this is organized espionage rather than isolated incidents?" "Yes, sir. The evidence suggests a coordinated effort to identify and recruit American military personnel for intelligence gathering purposes." Thompson felt the scope of the problem expanding exponentially. This wasn't just about one colonel's gambling debts. It was about foreign intelligence services systematically compromising American military personnel. "Master Sergeant," Agent Morrison interjected, "this information suggests your investigation has uncovered a much larger security threat than initially reported." "Yes, ma'am. The Ghost Unit betrayal was just one incident in a larger pattern of compromised operations." Thompson looked around the room, seeing his fellow officers as potential targets rather than just colleagues. If foreign intelligence services were systematically recruiting American personnel, anyone could be vulnerable. Colonel Martinez, who had been quietly processing his confession, looked up. "Master Sergeant, when I was recruited, the man who approached me seemed to know details about my personal life that weren't public. How would foreign agents have access to that information?" Brianna's expression darkened. "Sir, that's an excellent question. Either they conducted extensive surveillance on you personally, or they had inside information about military personnel and their vulnerabilities." "Inside information?" "Someone with access to personnel files, financial records, psychological evaluations, or family information." The implication hung heavy in the air. There might be additional traitors providing intelligence about American military personnel to foreign services. Thompson felt sick as he considered the implications. "Are you suggesting there's someone inside our own system providing targeting information?" "Sir, it's one possible explanation for how foreign intelligence services were able to identify and recruit specific individuals with precision." Agent Morrison looked up from her extensive notes. "Master Sergeant, this investigation appears to have uncovered a significant counterintelligence threat. Have you shared these findings with other agencies?" "Yes, ma'am. The FBI, CIA, and NSA have all been briefed on the preliminary findings. Today's operation was coordinated across multiple agencies." Thompson realized they weren't just dealing with a military investigation. This had become a full-scale counterintelligence operation involving the highest levels of American security apparatus. The door to the conference room opened, and Director Chen returned with several additional personnel who were clearly federal agents rather than military investigators. "Gentlemen," Chen announced, "I'd like to introduce Special Agent Martinez from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division and Agent Wong from the NSA's Internal Security Office." Thompson's heart sank as he realized the scope of agencies involved in investigating their conduct. This had gone far beyond a military disciplinary matter. Special Agent Martinez stepped forward. "Based on Master Sergeant Mitchell's investigation and the evidence she has provided, we are initiating formal counterintelligence proceedings against multiple personnel." Captain Rodriguez raised his hand tentatively. "Agent Martinez, what does that mean for those of us who may have committed security violations unintentionally?" "That will depend on the specific nature and scope of each individual's involvement. However, I want to be clear that any personnel who cooperate fully with our investigation will have that cooperation considered during any subsequent proceedings." Thompson understood the message. Cooperation might mean the difference between administrative discipline and federal prosecution. Agent Wong from the NSA stepped forward. "We're particularly interested in understanding how classified information was being accessed and shared outside normal channels. Master Sergeant Mitchell's investigation suggests systematic compromise of multiple security systems." Brianna activated her recording device again. "Sir, I documented 18 instances of personnel accessing information outside their operational need-to-know requirements. Additionally, I observed classified information being shared verbally in 14 separate conversations that violated compartmentalization protocols." Thompson thought about all the casual conversations where classified information had been shared, all the time security protocols had been bent or ignored for convenience. Every one of those incidents was apparently documented. General Stevens looked around the room. "I think we need to understand what we're facing. Are we looking at administrative discipline, criminal charges, or something else?" Agent Morrison consulted her tablet. "General, based on the preliminary evidence, we're looking at potential charges ranging from negligent handling of classified materials to espionage. The severity will depend on individual circumstances and level of cooperation." Colonel Martinez, who had already confessed to the most serious charges, spoke up. "What can I do to make this right? I know I can't bring back the soldiers I got killed, but I want to help stop this from happening to anyone else." Special Agent Martinez turned to him. "Colonel, your cooperation in identifying your foreign contacts and providing details about their recruitment methods could be extremely valuable. However, that cooperation won't eliminate the consequences of your actions." Thompson watched Martinez nod sadly. The colonel understood that cooperation might reduce his sentence, but it wouldn't save his career or eliminate the criminal charges he faced. Agent Wong addressed the room. "For those of you who may have committed unintentional security violations, we need complete disclosure of any incidents where you accessed unauthorized information, shared classified details inappropriately, or failed to follow established security protocols." Thompson knew he had numerous violations to disclose. The casual way he had handled classified information, the conversations in unsecured locations, the failure to verify clearances, all of it would need to be reported. Additionally, Agent Wong continued, "We need to know if any of you were approached by foreign nationals, offered money or other incentives for information, or asked to provide details about your colleagues or operations." Captain Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "Agent Wong, I was approached by someone at a bar about 6 months ago. They seemed very interested in my work and asked a lot of questions about base security procedures." Agent Wong immediately focused on Rodriguez. "Can you describe this person and the specific questions they asked?" "It was a man, probably mid-40s, well-dressed, claimed to be a defense contractor. He bought me drinks and asked about things like guard rotations, access procedures, and security clearance levels for different areas of the base." Thompson felt another chill. Rodriguez had been targeted for recruitment just like Martinez, but apparently hadn't taken the bait. "Did this person offer you anything in exchange for information?" Rodriguez thought carefully. He mentioned that his company was always looking for military personnel for consulting work after retirement, high-paying positions for people with inside knowledge of base operations. Agent Wong made detailed notes. "Captain Rodriguez, that was a recruitment attempt. The fact that you're reporting it now suggests you didn't provide the information they were seeking. I didn't tell him anything specific, but I'm worried about what I might have said casually during the conversation. Brianna spoke up. Sir, your conversation with that individual is actually on file. He was under surveillance by federal agencies, and your interaction was recorded. Rodriguez looked relieved. Does that mean you can verify what was discussed? Yes, sir. The recording shows that you deflected most of his questions and didn't provide specific operational details. Thompson realized that the investigation was much more comprehensive than any of them had understood. Federal agencies had been tracking foreign intelligence operatives and monitoring their recruitment attempts. Agent Morrison stood up. Based on the evidence presented and the admissions made today, we'll be conducting individual interviews with each person present. These interviews will be formal proceedings with legal representation advised. Thompson knew this was the beginning of a process that would likely end his career and possibly result in criminal charges. The systematic nature of his security failures, combined with his inappropriate treatment of a federal investigator, painted a picture of professional incompetence at best. Admiral Thompson, Agent Morrison continued, your case will require special attention due to your senior position and the scope of security violations documented during today's operation. Thompson nodded, accepting his fate. I understand. I take full responsibility for my actions and failures. Brianna stood and addressed the room formally. Gentlemen, I want to be clear about something. My investigation wasn't about ending careers or destroying reputations. It was about finding justice for 8 soldiers who died because someone betrayed them. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Colonel Martinez, your confession today takes courage, and it will help ensure that no other soldiers die because of similar betrayals. The rest of you have made mistakes, but mistakes can be corrected through proper training and oversight. Thompson felt a mixture of relief and continued shame. She was offering a path toward redemption, even after the way he had treated her. However, she continued, the systematic failures in security protocols that I documented represent a threat to national security that must be addressed comprehensively. Agent Morrison nodded. Master Sergeant Mitchell is correct. This investigation will result in significant changes to security procedures and oversight mechanisms across multiple commands. Thompson understood that their failures would lead to new policies and procedures that would affect the entire military structure. Special Agent Martinez stepped forward. Before we begin individual interviews, I want to emphasize that cooperation with this investigation is not just encouraged, it's essential for national security. The foreign intelligence network that targeted Colonel Martinez is still active, and we need to identify all their contacts and methods. The reminder that the threat was ongoing made Thompson realize that their investigation was part of a larger battle against foreign espionage efforts. Director Chen, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Master Sergeant Mitchell, on behalf of the intelligence community, I want to commend you for the professionalism and dedication you've shown during this investigation. Your work has uncovered a significant threat and will undoubtedly save American lives. Brianna came to attention and saluted Chen respectfully. Thank you, sir. I was honored to serve my fallen teammates in this way. Thompson watched the exchange and realized that while their careers were ending, Brianna's was advancing. Her investigation had been so thorough and professional that she would likely be promoted and given additional responsibilities. Agent Wong addressed the room one final time. The individual interviews will begin immediately. Each of you will be escorted to separate rooms where you'll have the opportunity to provide complete and truthful statements about your actions and knowledge. Thompson looked around the room one last time at his fellow officers. When they had entered for what they thought was a routine briefing, they had been respected leaders in the American military. Now they were suspects in a counterintelligence investigation that could result in federal prosecution. As federal agents began organizing the interview process, Thompson approached Brianna directly. Master Sergeant, he said formally, I want to provide you with a formal apology on behalf of myself and, I believe, my fellow officers. Brianna came to attention as Thompson continued. Your service and sacrifice far exceed anything any of us have achieved. Your professionalism during this investigation, despite the inappropriate treatment you received, demonstrates the highest standards of military bearing. Thompson looked at the other officers who were nodding in agreement. We failed in our duty to maintain proper security protocols, and that failure contributed to the deaths of your teammates. we failed to recognize and respect a decorated veteran who was serving her country with distinction. He took a deep breath before continuing. Most importantly, we failed to live up to the standards that soldiers like your fallen teammates died defending. Thompson came to attention and rendered a formal military salute to Brianna. One by one, the other officers followed his example. Colonel Martinez, despite his confession and obvious emotional distress, stood and saluted. Captain Rodriguez, General Stevens, Major Brooks, and even Dr. Parker stood and showed their respect. Brianna returned the salute with military precision, but Thompson could see the emotion in her eyes as she honored the respect finally being shown. "Thank you, gentlemen," she said quietly. "Your recognition means more than you know." Agent Morrison watched the exchange with professional interest. "Master Sergeant, what are your plans following the completion of this investigation?" Brianna considered the question. "Ma'am, I've been offered a position leading a joint task force focused on identifying and countering foreign intelligence recruitment efforts within the military." Thompson felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that her excellent work would be recognized and that she would be in a position to prevent future betrayals. "Additionally," she continued, "I'll be developing training programs to help military personnel recognize and resist recruitment attempts." Captain Rodriguez spoke up. "Master Sergeant, given my experience with being approached, would my participation in those training programs be valuable?" Brianna nodded. "Yes, sir. Personnel who have been targeted but resisted recruitment provide excellent case studies for training purposes." Thompson realized that even their mistakes and failures could be turned into educational opportunities to protect other soldiers. Agent Wong gestured toward the door. "If everyone is ready, we'll begin the interview process. Master Sergeant Mitchell, you'll be debriefing with Director Chen and the interagency team." As the federal agents began organizing the logistics of multiple simultaneous interviews, Thompson felt a strange sense of closure. The investigation that would likely end his career had also revealed the truth about his fallen teammates and would help protect future soldiers from similar betrayals. Brianna gathered her equipment and prepared to leave with the federal agents, but she paused at the door and turned back to address the room one final time. "Gentlemen, I want you to know that while your careers may be ending, your cooperation today will save lives. The information you provide about security failures and potential recruitment attempts will help us protect soldiers who are currently in harm's way." Thompson felt a final wave of respect for the woman who had systematically documented their failures, but still found ways to frame their cooperation as meaningful service. As Thompson walked toward his interview, he reflected on the lesson the quiet woman had taught them all. Real strength served quietly, patiently, with unwavering dedication to protecting others. Meanwhile, Brianna's secure phone rang. Director Chen nodded his permission to answer. "Master Sergeant Mitchell, this is Colonel Harrison from CENTCOM. We've identified another potential security breach. General Morrison, who recommended you for Ghost Unit, shows patterns consistent with foreign recruitment methods." Brianna felt her blood run cold. Her mentor might be compromised. "Financial irregularities and suspicious contacts," Harrison continued. "You have a meeting with him tomorrow at 0700 hours. He's expecting a briefing on your investigation. He doesn't know you survived the Ghost Unit ambush." The irony wasn't lost on her. She would investigate the man who had shaped her career, hiding in plain sight using her real identity. As she prepared for another dangerous assignment, Brianna thought about her fallen teammates. The investigation was far from over, and the betrayal was larger than anyone had imagined. Time to serve justice again.
These stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.